Journey, continuity of care on the long road to recovery. Sounds kind of boring. But this presentation's been on tour for a little bit. My name's Todd Weatherly, of course. I'm a therapeutic consultant. Most of the people in this room know what that is. Some of you don't, and that's okay. Therapeutic consultant, we work with families and help them navigate the treatment industry. I've been in the field for about 30 years. I started off in wilderness working with adolescents coming out of court-referred situations in the early 90s. So right when managed care hit, and that's something we're gonna touch on just a tiny bit. So at any rate, our company, our practice is Stucker, Smith & Weatherly. I'm the Weatherly. But navigating the treatment matrix is kind of what we do. And I pulled this slide up early because it gives a frame for what we're going to talk about. The wonderful thing that I love about Drew and his crew and everybody here at the research symposium is that they're giving us this data. They're diving in, they're looking at all the numbers, they're seeing the outcomes. It's work and research, and it's hard to do, and it's something that we need desperately so that we can feed the algorithm of what good treatment looks like, ultimately. But even Dr. Rubin standing up here, somebody was like, and Erica may want to chime in here in a second, but it's like, hey, so what happens when they get done with you? What happens after they finish your program? Where are they going? What's happening? And he'll give you the face that many people who are immersed in program will give you, which is, gosh, they don't always communicate. We don't always hear. It's expensive to track people for long-term outcomes. So just finding a mechanism for figuring out what's working out there in the real world is hard. As a consultant, what do we do? Guide families, we identify a treatment path, we support clients in progressive stages of care, navigate the behavioral health system, maintain a wide spectrum of connections. We go see all kinds of places. We know doctors and researchers and programs all across the country because we do a whole bunch of travel. So as a team, and I'm not necessarily unique as a consultant, that we've got a few consultants in the room, they can probably speak to this. Our team serves 100 clients a year. That's multiple placements per client. So we catch them in crisis, and then they're going into residential care, and then they're finding the next step, PHP, IOP, whatever. They're working their way through the treatment system. Multiple placements per client. We work with clients at every level of care. So they may come to us in crisis. They come to us as like, hey, we need a transitional program. I was like, I know this guy in Florida. We serve ages from 12 up to 65 plus as a team. And we visit nearly 200 programs a year. There's 5 of us, but in a year, therapeutic consultants, a few of us in here belong to the TCA, Therapeutic Consulting Association. There's a certain number of programs we have to see per year to maintain professional standing. We usually overshoot that mark a little bit, and we visit programs. And why is this important? What does that mean? A lot of research is focused on what people are doing when they're inside of a program because you get the chance to really look at them and look at them closely. We get to see the umbrella of what's happening across the treatment arc. We're getting information it's hard to find in research. Where do they fall apart? When does it work? How does transition happen? How is it different for a person who suffers from primary mental health issues versus someone who's on the spectrum? We talk to docs and researchers. We talk to clinical directors and program directors and parents and families and people in private practice. And all across the board, we get to hear what's the coolest thing in the world, in the country that's happening. What's the crappiest story you've heard about a provider who provided care for somebody? What's the worst kind of crisis? What's the most complex condition? We get to see it at its head. That is information I hope to bring to you today. So we travel. 40 to 60 programs, me alone. I visit that many per year. Sometimes we play golf. Half the programs on this, I'm visiting programs across the country, Alaska, Arizona, Utah. Half the programs that are represented on this page are closed. That says something about the treatment industry that we're in right now, because it's in a transition stage. It's in a stage of evolution. It's in a place that, fortunately, our research folks are helping us drive. They're helping us find the ways that care works. And hopefully we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We've seen good programs close. But more importantly, we're finding new methodologies and ways to approach new clientele. Ultimately, our young adult's a different young adult than it was 20 years ago or 30 years ago. So why are we here? Well, ideally, we'll identify levels of the care continuum and look at some of their strengths and weaknesses. We'll identify measures for assuring continuity between levels of care. We'll provide a case review of individuals to give real-world frame. The goal is to provide a framework for treatment and care throughout a person's journey from crisis to supported living. But I also want to point out, and this is important, how is it different for people on the spectrum? Because it really is. And for the longest time, we didn't think it was, or we didn't treat them like it was. There we go. First of all, let's be clear. Hero's journey sucks. Odysseus, he leaves this long, grueling journey away from home. He fights off a cyclops. He has to fight off Poseidon. He has to fend off a sorceress. The sirens are trying to get him. The sirens fends off the sirens. He escapes the nymphs who try to hold him captive. Finally, after all this struggle, many, many years of being out in the world, tries to come home, and the only person that recognizes him is his dog. In order to prove to everybody that who he is, he has to do the feats of strength, right? So I think in this, we could find metaphors for our members who are on the spectrum that are needing care, support, or treatment. There are parallels to their journey in this. And I think for them, there are times that it really does suck. I just dropped in to see what condition my condition was in. So I did a little, he's our substance use relapse guy. So if you go to AI and you pick out images for various conditions, this is the stuff it comes up with. Somebody and for some reason, AI still thinks that autism is only for adolescents and children, right? You put autism spectrum disorder and you look for images, it'll give you nothing but adolescents. Unless you tell it to give you something different. Hey, I need an adult on the spectrum. What does that look like? This is what it gave me. You got people with OCD, all these co-occurring conditions. I won't go through all these, but I tried to pick out some fun pictures, and sometimes it's fun to guess at what they might be. But, schizophrenia and thought disorder and OCD and anxiety and depression and all these things, all these co-occurring conditions, our friends on the spectrum, they suffer from those too. But their treatment still has to be different. I'm beginning to see the light. So most of the folks that find us that need care have never run into folks that are here in the room. Maybe they've run into a private provider, a therapist or a doc, and they've been lucky enough that that person knows something about their condition, can see it, can give them good advice, and help them get care and treatment that they might need. But a lot of people, it goes on, and it goes on until it becomes a crisis. Parents ignore the situation, or they don't know what to do about it, or they're enabling it, or whatever. There are all kinds of reasons why a person keeps walking down the road and their conditions become so severe, this stuff happens. Substance use, they relapse, they have a psychotic break or an episode, hospitalization, incarceration. The world is just too much for them. They get too little medication, whatever it is. All these things throw a person into crisis. And that's when they start really looking for help. It's like, okay, I've been to the hospital 3 times this year. I think we need help now. And it gets so bad that parents and family people supporting them are like, I'm beginning to see the light. I think we need some help. You're probably right. So stuff happens in the gaps. First slide, we live in the gaps. Therapeutic consultants, the gaps between care, the gaps in between providers, the gaps that happen when a person goes from one place to another. or tries to make some kind of transition, whether it's on meds or living situation, these are the gaps. Stuff happens. I mean, I think I could fill this page and make it all white with all this stuff. All this stuff is stuff that we see all the time. You know, and even this one, death. Parent died. Dog died. They got in a car wreck and one of their friends died. Friend on campus when they were in a residential program committed suicide. So somebody they knew died. And then people suffer the consequences. They made an attempt on themselves, sometimes they complete. Unfortunately, in behavioral health, sometimes conditions are terminal conditions. It's unfortunate, but it happens. Rogue psychiatrist, can't sleep, abysmal executive functioning. We've talked about that a little bit already. Kicked out of the program, discharged to a homeless shelter. Sometimes we wanted him to. Repeated self-harm, mismedicated, abused by staff, discharged with no early plan, hospitalized, sexual acting out, HIPAA violation, not enough money or insurance coverage. Big one. We won't go down that rabbit hole. So what do? You get the Google consultant out, you talk to Gemini, you say, hey, I've got a son or daughter or a family member that's suffering greatly from a condition and I don't know what it is. They've been in the hospital. These are the symptoms. What should we do? It might tell you you need treatment. Okay. What treatment? Where do you start? What kind of treatment is appropriate? What's the level of care they need? They need the hospital. They need a stabilization center. They need med regulation. They need a psychiatrist. Some people think that visiting your psychiatrist is treatment. It's like, it's not. It's part of the picture. So then you've got all of these. Let's see, I don't know if the video is working on this one, but you might have to press play on that. But this is my list of behavioral health parent companies. And when I tell you, and what I do here, and you don't have to pay too much attention, is I just start going through the folders. And when I tell you there are thousands of programs that I know about alone, and I haven't seen them all, you'll see this list start to pop up. You've got stabilization centers, crisis centers, detox centers, transition houses, sober homes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You give it all these kinds of care. And a lot of these, if you get into certain areas, like Florida, for example, you got a lot of programs out there that tell you that, yeah, we can handle that, no matter what you tell them. Oh yeah, bring them. You got insurance? Good. And so families are desperate. They're looking for answers. And you can see here now it's starting to populate like you can't, we could scroll for days. They don't know where to go, where to turn, what to do, where to start. They don't know what the condition is. And so I had the privilege of having Dr. Rubin here on my podcast, and he didn't know he was being quoted today, but he is. There are lots of ways to conceptualize interventions and lots of different therapeutic styles out there, but we have to find the right treatment for the right condition. Couldn't have said it better. We have to try to find the right treatment for the right condition. Condition, treatment, alignment. I do a portion of this presentation for attorneys and trust officers and high net worth kind of providers, art assessors. That's a pretty interesting little end of that world. But they don't know anything about this. They suffer from the same thing that parents suffer from, which is they don't know where to go. They've got all this stuff going on, and they don't know how to end the cycle other than to keep throwing money at it. They've got all this money in trust, and they keep throwing money. Well, we just, find them an apartment. Well, they destroyed that. Well, we'll get them in a hotel. They just don't know how to do it. We end up working with them. It's like, well, first thing, you need to stop giving them money. But they don't know anything about really how to manage the condition, and they're not even sure what the condition is. If you don't have condition, treatment, alignment, and something that for our folks on the spectrum, they have suffered from this probably as greatly as anybody who needs treatment. I would say that we've got a few competitors in there, but the folks on the spectrum, they get grouped in, and they have been for many years, grouped into just other forms of treatment. And it doesn't work. and they keep having crisis, and people don't know why, and et cetera, right? So I'm going to spend a minute on this one. This is the title of the presentation, Continuity of Care. But from the umbrella standpoint, and I bet at least 80% of this audience knows this stuff. Levels of care, lengths of stay. You got various levels of care. Each one of them has a general length of stay. You can anticipate residential care to be somewhere between 30 and 90 days. You can expect your basic IOP to be 6 to 8 weeks, that kind of thing. I won't spend a lot of time there, but the thing is that you've got gaps that exist in between these little bars. It looks all nice and clean, right? Works best when you've got cross-disciplinary professionals and client collaboration to facilitate the most suitable assessment, treatment level of care, length of stay necessary through progressive stages of treatment. But these are all boxes. They're boxes. Where did the boxes come from? Anybody know where all these boxes came from? Why they exist? Anybody got an answer? Third-party payers, insurance, exactly. You want to go get a license for a PHP or an IOP, you want to run a center, right? Then you've got to put in your licensure to whatever state you're in, and you have to have a curriculum, and that curriculum is going to have some standard features. You got to have psychoed, you got to have this, that, you got to do processing sessions, and et cetera. So some of your curriculum is already prescribed. Now, in Florida, they are the masters of doing this, but they have, you see in Florida more, they call it the recovery capital of the world, because you've got more recovery places in Florida than you've got any place else. And to the recovery folks' credit, they turned the insurance game into something that worked for them. They were able to, they could find a PHP, they bought a hotel, and they put a PHP across the road. We called it the Florida model a decade ago. And they just billed till the cows come home. For a while, P-tests were involved in that, and they made a lot of money, and then they got caught. But more importantly, they figured out the billing game. And then treatment became about a billing game. But regardless, and I told you I started in the field in the early 90s, and I was in the field when managed care came in and started defining treatment periods for us. You had 9-month and 12-month programs turn into 30-day, 90-day programs. And that's where we got 30 and 90 days from. Managed care wanted to define periods so it could conserve costs and project cost profiles and look at what treatment was and everything else. And they will, most of you have dealt with insurance, and we know that insurance will deny a claim for residential care just as quickly as they possibly can. You've been to the hospital? Well, that was residential care. You were there for 3 days. You're better now, right? Problem solved. The real goal here is for those we serve to achieve and sustain their highest level of independence, satisfaction, and fulfillment possible. That's our goal. It's all our goal. Mine, yours, program, doesn't matter who we are. Together, this is the goal we try to achieve. People have been, we've got the managed care overlords, but people got resourceful. In Arizona, I got to go and look at programs that were doing an interesting cut on this. Insurance will deny you residential care. Maybe you get 12 days, 15 days, 20 days. So instead of orienting their very, sophisticated and most structured clinical care in the residential environment, they shortened the residential stay environment. They made it made it look a lot more like detox, where the programming was not as stiff. It didn't feel like a pressure cooker. They got that person on the right medications. They gave them a very light approach to treatment. Let them do that for 30 days, cool off, and then when they hit PHP, that's where the rubber met the road, clinically speaking. I was like, it's pretty genius, actually. Figuring out, instead of fighting with insurance companies over residential stay, they knew they got better billing rates out of PHP, and they got innovative about it. Okay, cool. I like that. But more importantly, we keep trying to fit people inside these boxes. It's a treatment box. It's a time frame box. It's a clinical profile box. I got to go to a conference. There's one here down in the South, in Charleston, South Carolina. It's called the Low Country Mental Health Conference. Pretty good conference. So Dr. Stephen Hayes, the acceptance and commitment therapy guy, he came into the presentation and a training. And this conference is pretty, like, it's full of everybody from South Carolina that has come in, and they're working in the mental health system, or they're working in hospitals and things like that. So there's 400 people in this room, and he goes, your evidence-based practices are shit. I was like, I love this man. And so, I think that I love research, and I think that it's got a tremendous path for making us understand how we treat conditions. And innovative practices, if they're coming off the shelf and they haven't had time to get research or somebody to write a paper about it or what have you, it's not an evidence-based practice yet, but we see it, we know it works, we're using it. TMS is, we're hearing about TMS a lot these days, and the protocols that use, and we're very successful with transcranial magnetic stimulation. 10 years ago, you never heard about it. It was there, it existed, but then it got FDA approved and insurance billing. Like, that's when it popped up. That's when you started seeing all the stuff. So, as we try to fit people inside these boxes that have all these evidence-based practices because they've had 20 years of research of doing it, is it evidence-based because it works, or is it evidence-based because we've been looking at it for 20 years? That's a good question, isn't it? So, more importantly, and talking to Stephen Hayes, he's like, you gotta have therapeutic alliance. We already know therapeutic alliance is more important than almost anything else that you can have. And Jason, he was talking about how sometimes AI robots do better at having therapeutic alliance with our people, our members on the spectrum. So that's great. But as we try to fit people in boxes, especially for people on the spectrum, what we have is, let's take a look. It looks a little more like this. This is, I love this thing. This is a Caltech grad student, 20 years ago. This is riderless bike. Each one of these lines represents a riderless bike 800 times, and the profile of each of the riderless bikes and its path. And it was done as an experiment to see how AI would learn how to ride a bike. I think that we're doing this in treatment, with treatment models. We push the bike, we see how far it can go, it falls over down here. We learn a little more, we push it a little further, and it falls down to here. We learn a little more, and we push it a little further, and it falls down to here. Ideally, what we're trying to do is give this person that's in treatment a push that they get far enough to the place where they can start riding that bike on their own. Or at least partially, as much as they possibly can, right? But if we keep trying to fit them in boxes, which is why I really appreciate Dr. Rubin talking about it's very important that we have a flexible model. It's very important that we can address individual needs. We want to look at directions. We want to see where this person wants to go and support them there. So what you get is everything everywhere all at once. Program management, psychiatry, clinical model, transition, step down. You've got all these bits and pieces. Every last piece of this has to come together at once to really serve a person. And you have to know what condition you're working with, right? Condition, treatment, alignment, continuity of care. Any of the consultants in here, you've had a transport go bad? Raise your hand, please. Yeah. Every last one, every consultant I know, raise their hand. Transport goes bad, they don't make it to detox, or they get to treatment and they need detox, so you've got to go out of treatment and go back. Crisis intervention, you get an interventionist gets in there, doesn't know he's dealing with, the person's presenting with all the symptoms, but what they really are is on the spectrum. They go in, make no traction, goes sour. Family spent a bunch of money and the intervention didn't work. Family programming, stabilization and med management, rogue psychiatrist. You get any one of these things can go wrong. And they do. Part of the reason when I started doing this presentation a couple of years ago was because programs and consultants and providers, we weren't talking about this stuff. We weren't, because people are annoyed at consultants because we ask a lot of questions, we're nosy and opinionated and pushy. But sometimes we're that way because we really want to advocate for our client. We know something's not going right. We know something's not lining up. We know that they're not stabilized yet. We know that the family's limited on financial resources. We know they're getting ready to discharge. I had a client who was getting ready. They were no longer an appropriate. They were at a program. They are on the spectrum. And the program claimed to be able to work with individuals on the spectrum. But this person, they weren't working the program. They couldn't reach them. They were having a problem doing anything for them. I would say they encountered people in the spectrum, but they're not a spectrum program. So they get to this place where they're going to do transition, and everybody's kind of throwing their hands up in the air. Anybody know ARDA.org, the American Treatment, the Residential Treatment Association, ARDA? Anybody? Okay. So they handed them the ARDA website list of providers, which is about 26 programs, and said, pick one of these. That was their transition planning. You get stuff, and these are smart people. This is a private pay program. This is a place where you think these guys know what they're doing, right? And yet they did something like that, and naturally the person picked 3 places that were not appropriate for them, 2 places that the family could not afford, and not one of the places was a viable option. Well, they don't know what they're looking at. Heck, I doubt the therapist knew what they were looking at. You run into these problems. You got a program model, you got a clinical model, you got a theoretical model. These are different, but they all have to line up. People have to know what they're working under, right? There's all this stuff that has to come together. So to this, I want to say, well, first of all, to our program folks out there, hats off to you. I've run programs. It's no easy task. Thank you. Absolutely. This is not easy work. I've done it. It is hard. It takes up your life, and you have to be dedicated to it. So we give them a hard time sometimes, but we really do appreciate them. So this is as a consultant, I know, I designed this slide to be overwhelming. It's got too many words, I get it. Key questions. When I've got a client that's in a program somewhere, I want to know it's working. I want it to work. Look, placing a client another time for a family or for a program or for me who's a consultant that's getting this family through the treatment process, it is a pain to have to pivot and turn to another treatment option. So I call up and I say, hey, is my client settling in? Did they sign an ROI? Have they seen the therapist? Do they have a treatment plan? Are they eating, sleeping, pooping? Where are they pooping? Showering, medicating, participating, showing symptoms, ready for transition. Have they been hospitalized? Have they been discharged? Did they return to the program? Are they at your facility? Did they leave your facility? Have they been caught with something? Have been cutting? Have been in a fight? Been lost? Been found? Been arrested? All this stuff. I'm sure there are some people in here, programs and other folks alike, that could tell you stories about any one of these measures. Person left the facility, the program didn't know they had left. They don't know where they are. They discharged them to the airport and told you after they dropped them off. They gave them the wrong medication. Let's see, they've been there for 3 weeks and they haven't seen the psychiatrist yet and they don't have a treatment plan. Ouch. That's terrible. And then, one that we don't think about as much from the clinical side, but from our side, this is hugely important. Show me the money. Are they going to have enough? Does the insurance cover it? Are they going to afford the out-of-pocket? Are they going to pay so much for the out-of-pocket that they can't afford any other care from that point forward? Well, that's pointless. Where's my refund? You get people walk into a program, they've been there for 3 days, and the program's like, well, you signed the paperwork, we don't give refunds. It's 30 grand out of pocket. No good. What do you mean my coverage was only approved for 5 days? This is a huge issue for families all the time. I like going through this because it shows you when you're contemplating working with programs and dealing with individuals who have specialized needs, this stuff is where the rubber meets the road. Because stuff happens. A person's going to treatment for a reason, right? They're there because they got issues. You can 100% guarantee that they are going to put the program to the test with their issues. And the other thing about, working with individuals on the spectrum who have co-occurring mental health issues is at the beginning of this crisis level, you've also got individuals where their mental health stuff is just screaming so loud that it's very difficult for you to actually see what's going on. They're having thought disorder symptoms, they're suffering from psychosis, their OCD is really extreme, so they've got an OCD diagnosis. Oh, OCD is their problem. We're going to send them to an OCD program. No, they're on the spectrum, and that OCD program is going to fail miserably. Miserably. I don't understand why it didn't work. We spent $100,000 this year on treatment. We're worse off than when we started. Being able to talk to parents. Have they been to the dentist? Have they made a friend? So these are the continuity measures. These are the things that we do. Updates, we want them immediately when they admit. We want them immediately whenever something happens. We want them every week. We want to be able to talk to them. We want to be able to talk to the family. We want to know what's going on. If you don't have a consultant involved or somebody who's helping you navigate the process and you're a parent, you should be doing all these things. Stay on top of people. And it's not because programs are bad. It really isn't. It's because they get into their work. And they may not think about making sure that you're updated. And maybe you know something, especially as a parent, that they didn't know happened, 10 years ago, or they didn't know was part of the condition that you suffer from, or you didn't send them the assessment that said X. It's like, oh, wow, that one little piece of information was actually quite revealing. If you establish a really good channel of communication, you can be in partnership while a person goes through these channels of care. Communication, emails are good, text messages are great, but don't skip the phone call. If you're a person you've got somebody who's in treatment, call them. If you're the program and that person is in treatment with you, call them. Having a phone conversation is quicker. I know we all like documentation, right? But phone calls, they establish a link between the people that you're working with, whether it's a family or a consultant or both or whatever. Being able to have that channel of communication for people who feel free to do so. I know that parents are troublesome sometimes. They can be, work. But when they start to feel comfortable and they start to know what it is they're dealing with and they start getting support and education and everything else, then you can come up with something that's going to truly be flexible to the individual and serve their needs. Protocols, it's all about transition. You need enough time. They may not have a bed. They may be running a conference this week. And it's very hard for them to do an admit, Doing transition takes time. Logistics, do they have a bed available? How much is it going to cost? Do we need to run assurance verification of benefits? How long is it, do we need to transport them? Is transport available? All these pieces that fall into having a person make a successful transition. Because you just spend a lot of time here in residential treatment and all of a sudden you're looking at a nice transition. You know that you're going to need the support of a transport person, somebody who does that level of work. But they get there and all of a sudden that person doesn't want to go. They're resistant. And the transport falls apart. You can you can go backwards very quickly inside of hours if you're not careful. We talk, several of our presentations before now and after this will talk about how these singular moments represented a huge drawback or a success for people that were in their care. Ideally, if a person has to go to a higher level care, you get a little notice, but you don't always get it. Have that communication. This is big stuff. Communicating is essential, as is striking a balance between working with families, treating their loved one, and keeping referrents in the loop. Working collaboratively can help smooth out the rough edges along the path to recovery and keep that continuity going. Okay. I apologize for this slide again. So I tried, and this has actually been through several iterations and people giving feedback and trying to determine what it is that should belong on this sheet. And what should we say about it? Family involvement is critical. Your clinical team, clinical programming hours are laid out by licensure. We talked about this already. But how available are they off script? How responsive is the clinical team? How able are the program folks and the clinician and the therapist and the case manager able to pivot when something goes weird? When the person needs a little extra attention? When they're having night terrors at 3 a.m. in the morning? Like, how do you manage that stuff? Those are the places where the rubber meets the road. That is where that stuff starts to happen. Financial, we talked about. Psychiatry, and I tell you, psychiatry can be the bane of my existence. I know it's probably a problem for others as well. I see the psychiatrists in here. You know, a good psychiatrist, I'll say it, frame it in the positive. A good psychiatrist is worth their weight in gold, 100%. Physical and medical management, case management, assessment. Good Lord, assessment. Everybody does their assessment. You may be coming in with like hundreds of pages worth of assessment material, but you as a program need to be like, is it a fit for us? Any good program does a really good assessment. And they'll tell you. My favorite, I'm going to embarrass him a little bit, I'm sorry. My very favorite to this day, hands down response to an inquiry about an admission is from Dr. Rubin. And we'll even talk about the case a little bit, but we gave him the parameters of the case, and he's like, there was a long pause, and he goes, I'm just trying to decide whether to hang up on you right now. Now, we're friends with Dr. Rubin, so he can say that to us, but it is still hands down my favorite response to a referral. He took the referral, by the way. Transitions, financial, outreach and admissions. Man, things can go wrong there. People who do good admissions work, who can really, they know their program, they can talk to families, they can help people regulate about taking this giant monster step of deciding on treatment, where to go next or what to do now. These people, I can do a bunch of that work, and I can help families understand and everything else, but if they get somebody on the other end of the phone they don't feel like they jive with, they'll shut that down and they'll turn away from a treatment process in a heartbeat. These people are like, these folks are good outreach and admissions folks. They're magic when they do their job really well. The true continuity is built on 3 essential steps: a smooth admissions process, consistent and thoughtful care, and a strong bridge to whatever's next. This is from another program, Jason Grigla. He is the NeuroDev mentoring. Progress should be cumulative. I love this. I reached out to doctors and people that I know that are in the field, and I said, hey, if you were going to say something about working with people on the spectrum, what would you do? What would you say about these folks? Progress should be cumulative. Looking at ASD through a mental health treatment lens is like looking at mental health through the medical model. Does that make sense? I know it does to a bunch of people. If you try to treat mental health through a medical model, which is like, you broke your leg. Okay, come in. We're going to set the leg. We're going to put a cast on. See you later. Take some meds. That's how we treat mental health in hospitals. You're having psychosis and you're hearing voices and command hallucinations. Oh, that's great. Come on in. When you cool off, here's some meds. Best of luck. Problem solved. That's how we treat. We know that that's not treatment. We know that that doesn't work. Yet we somehow still keep doing it. So for those with co-occurring mental health conditions, their care has to be approached from a neurodivergent lens, with attachment and safety being key to bridge the divide between lower brain and higher brain. Couldn't agree more. Development is about building new neural pathways. It's physiological, not insight. So I won't spend too much time. Anybody know Howard Gardner's story about the animals? Howard Gardner is responsible for the multiple intelligences theory. So they frame it in the form of a school. It's like they try to do a standard curriculum for all the animals, but the rabbit excels at running but suffers from anxiety and exhaustion from makeup work and swimming. The squirrel is a great climber but gets injured and falls climbing and running due to overexertion and flying. The eagle excels at climbing but insists on his own methods, getting disciplined. An eel able to swim, roam, climb, and fly a little graduates with the highest average despite being an abnormal student in a conventional sense. That's what it's like trying to put people who are on the spectrum inside of these treatment boxes that we've created that get applied to almost everybody. We're finding that our clients without autism tend to have a baseline for functioning. They can identify a time when their life was, where they were performing and functioning at best. People on the spectrum don't have that frame of reference. Dr. Kristen Zielinski, Neurodivergent Collective out there in California. This is a good friend of ours, another consultant, Rachel Gutierrez. We're often working with individuals whose developmental timelines look very different. So progress really has to be viewed as subjective rather than age-based. Is a 36-year-old a young adult? Depends on what developmental stage their maturity level is at. Can a young adult program admit somebody who's 36? You bet they can. If they fit the programming model and they fit the community that's there, you bet. It's not about age. It's about this feature. Because autism usually comes with multiple co-occurring challenges, somatic experiences aren't separate from the work. They're part of it. Overwhelm is also a big factor in the population. Going slowly and taking things a step at a time can make the difference between staying engaged and hitting the shutdowns many autistic individuals need to regulate and reset. You'll hear this theme over and over and over again while we're here. And finally, I told you I was going to put him on the spot. Lots of ways to conceptualize interventions. You got to find the right treatment for the right condition. It's a pivotal topic in our treatment world. That's why we do direction therapy. This is a concept that I'd love to see applied in lots of ways. I think that we talk about people tailoring to their clientele. You know, it's individualized care. Dr. Rubenstein decided to call it direction therapy, but I think this dives to a deeper purpose where it's like, we want to go towards something, not away from something. A lot of mental health is designed to go away from whatever terrible thing you've been doing. And in this model, you're going toward the thing that fills you up the most. I really like that approach.